Hello and welcome to the Career Change Diaries podcast with me, Alice Stapleton. And today I'm really glad to be speaking to a previous client, Chris Rice. How are you doing, Chris?
Yeah, I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well, thank you for sparing your time to share your career change journey. So Chris worked in marketing for the film and entertainment industry since leaving university back in 2006, achieving senior roles within global agencies and brands before making the move to become freelance in 2020. That must have been quite daunting, like mid COVID.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then in 2023, he decided that a more wholesale change was needed. And today, while still working in his original industry, he's also retraining to become a plumber, which is
Indeed.
amazing. So, Chris, how was your summer?
My summer was packed full of reading and studying. That was probably the main change, other than the occasional holiday.
Sounds good. Well, yeah, we were just chatting before we pressed record, and you mentioned about all the science that you were having to learn when it comes to plumbing, and I was quite struck that was not something I would have considered. But yeah, I guess water flow and I don't know, chemicals and stuff like that. Yeah, we never have thought of that.
All of the scientific principles that go around it. So it's definitely something I wasn't necessarily fully expecting. But, thankfully I was paying attention whilst doing my GCSEs.
Oh God, yeah, that takes me back. Okay, well, once again, I'm really glad to speak to you, and quite intrigued to hear a bit more about where you've got to with everything. So, what I like to do at the beginning of these podcasts is just understand a bit about your previous career to start with, which I suppose it's not so previous because it sounds like you're still doing a bit of it now. But talk me through what you were doing, what you are doing, and start to tell me a little bit about what those niggles were that started.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned in the intro, I've worked in marketing since I left university back in 2006, many moons ago now, and to be honest, quite similarly to many people who work in marketing, I kind of fell into it. I started working within music first off, and because of that time and because of the age I was at that time, I was one of the very few people in the business who had a Facebook account. And so I was basically given that responsibility to work on social media within that world of music. And I subsequently, that ultimately just sort of led on to the next job and the next job and the next job, putting me as a sort of a specialist within social media marketing at that time. And it continued. And so I moved over to film and TV, worked in that world. I set up an agency with a friend of mine and did that for a couple of years. I then moved through various jobs, getting sort of like higher and higher, setting up my own agency sort of turbocharged that career. And so I ended up sort of in more senior roles, working generally in agencies. And there was one job that took me to Spain to live there, and then back to London. So it's like quite a sort of a varied. I went through quite a few different roles as I went along, each time hunting for something, looking for something different, and I wasn't necessarily sure what it was. Now, I suppose my kind of my upbringing and the way in which we're sort of educated about work societally was, making me think, oh, well, the thing I'm hunting for is more money and more status. And this is the job that, I'm obviously very good at this because I can get the jobs and I'm going higher up the ladder. And so the thing that's actually missing is that status or that money. And that wasn't solving the problem. It felt like it felt like I was hungry or nervous the whole time. I wasn't really sure that this was kind of right for me. And no matter what changes I made sort of within that career, within that industry and that world, no matter what changes I made, it didn't sort of satiate that hunger, that sort of unsettled feeling in me. And so I started sort of looking for other things. Like as you say, in 2020, I moved on to be freelance. So the agency that I was working with specialized in cinema, and obviously we know that cinemas closed down and or closed their doors, and film productions paused. So obviously the work that fed that agency dried up. And so I then moved freelance and enjoyed that. I loved the variety of work that I did, but I missed working with people. I missed speaking with people kind of directly. So I then went into a permanent job, and just prior to that, I'd had a daughter. And that job that I moved on to was within festivals, and it kind of didn't really match, although it sort of matched something in my heart. I really love music festivals. I love music and I wanted to be involved in it. It didn't match my life then, and it was still within marketing. That was still exactly the same thing. I was trying to solve the problem by doing the same thing, right. Using the solutions.
And the problem being, as you said, just this sort of feeling that you were searching for more.
Yeah, I couldn't really put my finger on it, to be honest. I felt, the classic thing is like, people talk about imposter syndrome and stuff like that. I didn't feel I necessarily had the training that many people had, or it's such a fast moving industry, marketing as a whole. And I always felt slightly behind. But I think that's just, if you were ahead, you'd be a genius. But I gave myself a hugely hard time there, but I felt very, not comfortable. Not that I'm necessarily aiming for comfort, but I didn't feel at home with what I was doing. So I was very much kind of constantly looking for other options, really.
And can you remember what maybe was that tipping point then that you started to think, maybe I need to actually do something different or something else?
There was... Well, the main trigger for thinking about career coaching or career change coaching, and particularly sort of speaking to you, was actually having dinner with a friend of mine who had recently worked with you, and we'd been talking for a while. She'd been wanting to make a change for quite some time. And we very much sort of saw eye to eye on a whole bunch of things when it comes to sort of careers. And we talked during dinner about this process that she had gone through. And that, for me, that was the main trigger, because it made me realize that, well, there's support. There are people who know about this process. And there are people who you can talk to who won't think that you're just, moaning, which is what I felt whenever I talk to people about. Yeah, I very much felt that people were like, "Oh, boo-hoo, you've got a great job. You can, it allows you a lot of flexibility in your life, and why would you want to go and change that? You know, you picked this job, you've been doing it for like 15 odd years or whatever. My maths is terrible. But you've been doing it for a substantial amount of time. Just stick with it and just keep going. And because the idea of changing careers really goes against the grain, you know. And so that was basically the main kicker.
Okay. I'd forgotten about that, actually.
Mm.
So were you not maybe even aware that there was support coaching, that it was like a thing, or?
I'd heard of it. Right. I'd heard of it, but I think I was kind of unwilling to maybe accept the fact that I needed some external support for it. I think I probably thought, hey, you know, I've got Google. You know, and felt that I kind of knew myself well enough to solve this problem, you know, and that my day-to-day job has always been solving problems and like choosing a direction. And I was very frustrated with the fact that I couldn't do that for myself. I could do that for my clients, but I couldn't do it from a sort of a personal level. And so that conversation was very much here is someone who is just like me, and who is very open about the fact that they needed help, and they went and asked for help, and it worked for them, you know.
Okay, well, that was lucky.
Very much, yes.
Okay, so you hear about that. At that point, because I'm always slightly aware that when people come to coaching, there must have been like a sort of micro decision before that. Well, I suppose before you commit to the coaching, that is you basically saying, yes, I am now going to change this. Was that something that you kind of experienced, or was it just a kind of organic, I'll see what happens? Or
there was a gradual build. So I've taken a couple of career breaks over my career, and during some of those times, I've sort of tried different things and sort of experienced different things, met different people, and that very much sort of led me down the path of kind of going, well, this isn't really what I'm currently doing right now, isn't really what I actually want to do, and there are other ways of living around there. But I suppose when my daughter was born, that very much sort of adjusted my outlook. And I would, well, so in the first year or so is obviously, for anyone who has had a kid, they know how hard that first year is. And trying to juggle a job that you're not enjoying with the exhaustion and the high anxiety and stress that comes with having a newborn is very difficult. And I would look around my local area and see all of these dads who just look sad. They look tired. They looked sad. And I remember this was before we had our daughter, when we knew she was coming. I'd see these dads and I'd be like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be that dad who is just sort of pedaling as hard as he can and just not being the person that he really wants to be. And then suddenly I found that I was exactly that guy, and just sort of unhappy in my work, and just not feeling like there was a way through. Like, my daughter was absolutely everything to me. And she became my absolute focus, which meant that I started feeling like I was kind of withering away. And so I basically realized that I didn't want to get to the point where my daughter was 17, 18, 16 maybe, and starting to think about entering the job market. And I didn't want to give her the example of this is what work is. You know, work is stressful. You hate it. You've just got to plug at it and just earn that money and all that sort of thing. I didn't want to give her that example because I don't believe that. I don't believe that work has to be that way, but I got stuck in that rut. And so that was another sort of driver for me was, well, what example do I want to present to my daughter? I want to give her the example that, you know, if you're unhappy with something, you can change it. It will be hard, but you can change it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just really struck by that. Yeah, I think it's we play such an important role model, as you say, to children when they see what work is to their parents as they're growing up. And well, then interestingly, when you were talking about the feedback you were getting from maybe some of your friends about, you know, just carry on, and that's kind of what work is. And yeah, there's definitely this messaging that where work generally sucks and you just get on with it. And it doesn't have to be like that, as you say.
It doesn't have to be like that. And, you know, it's all those things of like the idea that burnout is a badge of honor, and stress and busyness is all a badge of honor. You know, dropping hobbies in favor of your jobs, you know, influencing your own mental health in a negative way in favor of work seems to be a common thing.
Yeah, which is bizarre. When you hear it out loud, you think, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is that a badge? I don't want that badge. I think I definitely used to think I wanted that badge. As you say, it's like a sort of societal gung-ho type, just break your back for whatever. But then I think you get to a point where you realise that doesn't sound that much fun to me. Okay, so that gets you into coaching. We start working together. What can you remember about some of the learnings that you took away from the coaching and the program in general?
I think one of the main elements that I didn't necessarily expect was a greater understanding of myself outside of work. You know, obviously the career change sort of program that you go through, career is in the title, and I didn't necessarily fully anticipate the wider aspects that we would actually kind of look at, and gaining a better understanding of myself and what makes me tick, what excites me, what interests me, what I'm already good at, but, you know, not necessarily, I suppose, monetizing. Because I think quite often when people look at career changes, or they turn to Google and look at like other career options, there is a knee-jerk reaction towards going, well, these are the things that I do in my job currently. How can I transfer those to another job or another career? And I think we neglect all of the other elements that we have of ourselves that we haven't monetized, or we haven't sort of fully analyzed at all. And that side of things was something which I found really interesting within the process, was looking more holistically at my life and me as a person and my personality and my likes, dislikes, passions, etc., to see whether there were any opportunities within that to try and break the hold that marketing had over me, you know. That was a big aspect for me.
Well, and that's so true. And I often make an effort in my introductory sessions to say just that, yeah, it's not just about transferable skills from what you've done before, because that's often why people get a bit blinkered, and they can't really, they start to feel a bit trapped because they just look at what they've already done, and therefore what does that mean for what they can take forward. But sometimes people have just real untapped innate talent, strengths, qualities that have just never really been needed in what they do, but they would
Absolutely.
actually really love to utilize a bit more. And for you, can you remember what some of those were that got you thinking about, I guess, a slightly more practical, hands-on careers?
Yeah, there were definitely those sorts of elements that popped up. For example, like during some of my off time during COVID, like many people, I built a shed, a garden office.
Fine
which
example
Oh
of which we
yeah,
can see behind
if
you.
you can see it, it's still unfinished, obviously, because it looks like I'm in a cardboard box or a sauna.
Oh, I thought that was the
vibe,
finish. Yeah, like very kind of what's the word? Oh,
rustic.
yes, that's the word. Yeah. Norwegian.
Yeah, completely. Well, it's I am quite a practical person. I like to do things with my hands. I play music. I have a lucky skill of being able to teach myself musical instruments quite easily. So I have that sort of practical, hands-on ability, which is not something that I would necessarily use in my day-to-day at work. But equally, I enjoy speaking to people. I have I'm very empathetic. It seems from all of the work that we did, there was a huge amount of sort of empathy and fairness and solving problems and doing things for individuals rather than, say, corporations, which fired me up, got me excited, and feeling like enabling me to feel like I made a sort of proper difference to people is something that I found that is part of me, really. And yeah, so it's those sorts of elements started to pop up, which were not necessarily in keeping with exactly what I was doing before. Particularly the hands-on element. We're kind of not explicitly taught this, but I suppose subconsciously it seeps in that I think a job without a computer in front of you is not really a worthy job. I think that was definitely my experience. You are sat at a desk, you are working in front of a computer. There's an obsession with data science, particularly within the marketing industry. And if you need to be obsessed with data and analysis and all this sort of stuff, which starts to erode the concept of other jobs, other super important roles within our modern world, that I would just not consider because they weren't me sat in front of a computer with a keyboard.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, you're right. There's this sort of perception or judgment, or I don't know even if it's a bit of stereotyping that goes on around certain careers, certain professions, industries. Yeah, there seems to be this sort of hierarchy or weird status about, as you say, which jobs are more worthy, or that somehow you could be seen as more successful if you did that job over another job, which
absolutely, and it's completely daft, and it's something which a similar attitude exists in other countries, but also in some countries that doesn't exist at all. My sister lives in Australia, and the sort of perception of people, of tradies, in Australia is completely different to how it is here. There is a sort of there is a snobbery, I think, here around trades, or maybe that's very sweeping. In my upbringing, there was a snobbery around trades. And I definitely took that on.
And can you? I'm probably putting words in your mouth, but I suppose I can put myself in your shoes going through the coaching. So you have an ideas bank. You're encouraged to put lots of ideas and options in there. Can you remember wrestling with that a little bit then, in terms of what you were putting in there?
Absolutely, because throughout the process, throwing every potential sort of job option that pops up through the various kind of tests that you do and surveys and sort of processes that you go through, creating that very long list of all the potential ideas, all the way from I want to be an astronaut when you're a tiny kid, all the way up to sort of modern day. There were all sorts of roles that would appear within that I would have an instant gut reaction to. There would be an instant sort of, oh, I'd love to do that, or there is no way I would ever do that job, And some of those with good reason, but some of those were just without any necessarily a good reason. And I think the process of looking at those jobs on paper gave me the opportunity to properly dive into them and go, well, why do I feel that way about that particular role or that particular type of job or line of work? Is that feeling based in fact, or is it sort of preconceptions? Is it emotional? All of this sort of that analysis of them was really helpful, because it enabled me to properly confront some of those feelings that I had towards some jobs.
Well, I think it's a lot to be said about your own self-awareness there, that you caught yourself doing that you were able to challenge yourself and think, hang on a minute here.
Yeah, well,
I actually really like the sound of these jobs, but I'm writing them off for some reason.
That's years of therapy.
I know. Therapy is awesome. Everyone should have therapy.
I agree with that. With that.
One takeaway from this podcast: get a therapist.
Get a therapist.
They are awesome. Okay, so yeah, and as you say, I suppose therapy is great for raising awareness and making more reflective, challenge your own thoughts, where they come from, that sort of thing. So yeah, it sounds like that backdrop was really helpful in that respect. And then, so I vaguely remember how you landed on plumbing, and I think because it wasn't, am I right in thinking it wasn't in your list, and then it popped up as an idea?
It wasn't. It wasn't on my list, and it hadn't really popped up in those sort of in various sort of tasks or anything like that. But it actually came. I was starting to think more about sort of hands-on roles, stuff that you can do with your hands. So, for a while I was thinking baker, because like most of the planet, I love bread. and again, like most, a sort of a section of the planet, I started making sourdough during COVID, but I'd been involved in that prior. It really has, yeah. But I was starting to I was looking into that, but starting to discount it because of the super early hours, which is a kind of a critical thing. But I'd been sort of chatting about it with my partner. She was talking about this whole process with a friend of hers, and her friend basically was like, well, why doesn't he look into plumbing as an idea? And my partner came back and said, this person said this, and I was like, no way. And no, absolutely not. But I went away and Googled it and had a look, and I was like, well, you know, there are some benefits here. There are some benefits here, and you know, the plumber that we use, he's cool. He seems happy and laid back. And then my partner had another conversation with our friend, and they said, oh, well, the reason it popped into my mind was because a friend of hers had moved from marketing to become a plumber. And so that gave me that, oh, okay, that is kind of possible. And again, people like me can do it and have done it. And so I just started having conversations just to see whether what it felt like, what it sounded like as a job and kind of as a lifestyle. And as soon as I started having those conversations,
with plumbers,
with plumbers, yeah. So with this friend of a friend and with my plumber and a couple of plumbers locally, I was suddenly thinking, yeah, this is a definite possibility. It wasn't a oh, this is exactly what I've been searching for, but it was this could actually tick a huge number of the boxes for me, you know.
Okay.
Mm.
Well, and then I think that's important for people to hear as well, that there wasn't, you know, the clouds didn't part and there wasn't this sort of epiphany moment of, ta-da, this is what I was destined to do. That there was, just a kind of normal process of, okay, well, yeah, this is sounding good. This is encouraging. Yeah. Ticks the boxes, as in, you know, what we uncovered as being important to you started to match up with a lot of that. So where did you go from there?
So from there, I started looking into what it takes to become a plumber. And I suppose I vaguely knew that you'd probably have to get some sort of qualifications.
Yeah, probably going to help. Yeah,
you can just turn up,
stick some pipes in, turn the tap on, hope for the best.
Done. Absolutely, that's it. So I started looking into it and what the options were for me as a person in their late 30s. Like how you make that transition, because obviously, I suppose a lot of us think of people who were within those trades of having done apprenticeships and going through that process. Now that process takes 4 or 5 years and generally isn't necessarily as available to people at my age. It is a possibility, but it's generally quite rare. And also the pay at that stage is very low. And, you know, so I started looking more into those education options and the realities of when it comes to sort of like pay, what can I expect? How can I expect this to move forward? As well as, once I'm qualified as a plumber, what's next? You know, are there any further qualifications that I can and should get? You know, I think when we think of plumbers, we think of taps and boilers ultimately, and toilets. But there's a whole lot more to plumbers that I discovered through this research, in particularly when it comes to, say, renewables and modern heating technologies and all that side of things, which again started to tick more boxes for me. So I realized that I could train as your standard plumber. I could train as a gas and heating engineer and be able to install your classic boilers, but then I can do further training into heat pumps or solar hot water energy, like energy systems, and all of these sorts of like associated elements, which aren't necessarily straight away obvious to me, because again, speaking to the plumbers that I knew here, They couldn't be bothered doing that. They're already set. They have their business model. They are, one guy I was speaking to, he was just like, I love boilers. Most plumbers find boilers really boring, but I love it. I know exactly what I'm doing every day, and everyone has a boiler, and everyone needs their boiler fixed and serviced. So he's kind of set up. And another guy was like, I love bathrooms. That's what I like doing. I love designing bathrooms and giving people a wonderful bathroom to keep themselves clean. And I realized that maybe my thing could be renewables. I can do the day-to-day aspect of plumbing, but maybe sort of trying to better sounds quite lofty, but bettering the planet and like bettering our environment through this skill. That kind of started making me feel sort of quite excited about it, and that there was something unique that I could do.
Interesting. Yeah, as you say, you wouldn't necessarily think that, but yeah. Well, and great that you found a way to connect with, I suppose, your values and
completely
that you might want to have. And you say it sounds lofty, but I hate to think how much we're all individually contributing through what systems we have in our house. And yeah, that's got to start somewhere, haven't you? So,
absolutely.
Okay, so you're looking into the training. So what gets you over that final line of commitment to this career?
There were lots of conversations that I had with my partner, friends, family about it, and that support network was probably the final piece of the puzzle that gave me the confidence to actually sort of move forward. And that all of those conversations I had with plumbers and tradespeople, that gave me that confidence that this is something that I could actually do, and that would be worth my while, really. I also had to come to terms with the idea that one of the things that I worried about was the commitment to making a decision, and that being my decision. That's the be all and end all. That's double underlined. That is the thing I'm doing. And I basically had to give myself a little bit of slack and just be like, this is our decision. I am choosing to train. I want to make a change. So this is our change. It doesn't have to be the final change. And even if I, at the end of this process, don't actually become a plumber, I still know how to plumb. I still know how this whole process works. I'll still be qualified. I'll still be able to do work at my place or help other people out. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm committing wholeheartedly to becoming a plumber. And that, for me personally, was handy. That I found that very helpful, because it does give me a slight get out if I need it. And it gave me rather than I'm training because I have to, and this is my career change option, the only thing I'm doing, rather than having that pressure, it was, I'm studying to become a plumber because I want to, because I enjoy it. And if I decide to use these skills, great. If I don't decide to use these skills, fine. Who cares? It's absolutely fine. I've just gone through a process. I've done something else. And I suppose the reality of going through this process was I wanted to make a change. I didn't know what that change necessarily would be at the start, but this is our change. So why not try this change? This studying is all still part of that kind of discovery process for me. So I might come out of it and think, no, actually, I did want to be a baker, or, something like that. Could do, but you know, I wouldn't feel bad about that either.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like that's such a great approach to decision making. It's often the key for people because, as you say, it just takes the pressure off.
Mm.
It's so hard to make a decision when, as you say, you're putting this pressure on yourself for it to be like the be all and end all, and this is the job, this is the career I'm now going to do for the rest of my life. And then that creates so many fears around getting it right, and it has to be perfect, and what if it's not? And
Exactly.
you get into all that territory, which then stops you making any decisions, stops you making any steps forward.
Absolutely. And I think, there was a very much a thought in my head about, what's the worst that could happen? I was very scared of making that wrong decision. But if I made that quote unquote wrong decision, what would be the worst that would happen? Essentially nothing. Like, I would be on the hook for fees for the course, but I would still come out with a qualification. I'd still have trained, and I would have made progress in some form or other that I wouldn't have made otherwise. And I think that there was, one of the exercises that we did during the program was this, I can't remember the name of it now, but there was this visioning of your best self. That was it.
Oh yeah, powerful self.
Your powerful self. And there was a sort of phrase that came out of it with that powerful self, like that powerful self would say to me. It's obviously a very abstract thing for someone who hasn't actually been through this process, but envisioning, your most powerful self, and them essentially giving you a pep talk. Now, my pep talk and my phrase includes a swear word, so I won't actually say it. But ultimately, it's screw it. Why not? Just do it. Like, and that sort of boldness, and that let's just go ahead. You've got some cards in your hand, play them, and just see what happens. And I think that sort of feeling of, yes, I can roll the dice. This is my life. This is in my control. If things start to go wrong, I can pull the cord and I can get out of this if it doesn't feel right. But the important thing is that I jumped because I already know that I want to jump,
Yeah, definitely. Well, and just those small steps forward. Just see where it goes. Absolutely. I do remember that. It was a big bucket.
There we go.
No, I think loads of people have sworn on this before, so that's fine.
Great.
Maybe I just have to put like an explicit warning on. I should check that really. I can edit that out if needs be. But yeah, it was that sort of boldness and courage just to try something, to do something. And what is life if not just a series of experiences anyway? As you say, you do the training, and maybe you end up putting a bathroom in that shed,
Yeah.
A nice little outhouse.
Completely.
Well, and you mentioned the fees there, and I think it's important with career change that people get a sense of how they can make it work financially. So talk me through, because you've got family. You mentioned in the intro that you're still doing a little bit of your other work, previous work. So how are you managing it all?
I'll be honest, it's tight. It is tricky because training costs money and time. And when you have a big part of my values is that I don't want this to impact my time with my daughter. So whilst she's still at nursery, she and I hang out on Mondays currently, and I don't really want this change to have a huge impact on our weekend time together. I don't want to be that dad who's like constantly working, because she's got no concept as to whether it's I'm training to do a different job or whether I'm doing something else. It's just work, or it's just not playtime. And so that means that I've, the training that I do has to go somewhere else, and some of that's in the evenings, but I also take Fridays to be my training day. So there are 2 days out of the working week where I can't earn money, because I'm with my daughter and because I'm training. And so I currently freelance, still within marketing, for 3 days a week, to keep some of the money coming in. I also have a very supportive partner. I'm very lucky in that regard. She has had to take on a chunk of the sort of the financial pressures. So I'm very lucky in that regard. But there is definitely a lot of honest conversations which have to be had in terms of how much will this affect you financially? How will you keep things going? Keep the lights on, keep being able to do other things that make you, whilst giving that training a good enough run. The plumbing training, generally on average, it seems like it costs about £7,000 to £8,000. So it's not insignificant. But most colleges, well, you can get free courses through some colleges, or bursaries and that sort of thing. So I'd recommend, if anyone looks at this sort of thing, I'd recommend looking into that and looking for those financial support options. But there are also many colleges that just offer interest-free payment plans, which is what I'm on.
Okay.
So
that's good to know.
It's good. I mean, basically they want people in, and the way that particularly the trades industries are after Brexit, we need more people, and so there is a greater emphasis on enabling people to do it. Now that means that I'm paying £190 a month to pay this off. So I'm going to be doing that for the next 3 years plus, which is way more palatable than forking out $7,000 to $8,000 in a chunk. But it does mean that there are those additional costs that you have to factor into day-to-day life.
Yeah. Well, that's great though, that you can. You get a day with your daughter. You're still getting paid for 3 days work, but you're training for a different career at the same time. You still have your weekends.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
It's all right.
Blended it. Yeah,
it's all right. It is a lot. There is a lot of impact on, say, social time. So I don't necessarily have as much time to go out for drinks with friends, or I don't have the money to do that. I've got to be very, very careful with that. And it means things like, I haven't bought new clothes for quite a while, and all of those other things that we would probably just kind of do in our day-to-day lives. So there is a trade. You do have to trade off certain aspects.
And how do you yourself make peace with that? Because I've certainly heard a lot of clients where that's a real sticking point. Then I think sometimes that's often what holds us back, is that we create these barriers and we're just like, that's a hard no when it comes to lifestyle, I suppose. So how have you made peace with that?
To be honest, it's a constant readjustment. Even this morning, I was having a low moment around it. Something breaks, or you get a hole in your shoes, or, you know, all of this sort of stuff, and you start getting frustrated at the fact that you don't have the cash that you used to, or you don't necessarily, you know, as a freelancer, you don't have the time to earn that money and all of that sort of stuff. So there are times where it's really hard, I think, like mentally, I think. And the only way that I can keep focus with that is by talking, and like by talking to my partner, talking to my friends and family, and getting that renewed kind of bravery and sort of drive from them, going like, this will pass. Like, you are doing something. You will not be destitute, you know, just by the fact that you can't go and have a pint with a friend, you know. That doesn't mean the end of it. You can still have a phone call, you know. Having friendships does not mean that it has to cost money, you know, but we're so used to life costing money, you know, as soon as you go out the door. It's just this is a career change process that you're going through, but you, I think, probably have to be aware of the fact that it is a lifestyle change, like, process that you're going through as well. So yeah, that sort of flexibility is important, but occasionally it does hurt, and it does feel really uncomfortable and difficult. But, you know, I think trying to hold on to the fact that you're doing something brave, you're doing something that not many people do, and
for that reason,
yeah, and you have to have a good network of people around you to help you out there, I think.
Well, and as you say, I think it's important to acknowledge it is temporary, that it will pass. That yes, it's tough at the moment, and it sounds like you're sacrificing a lot and compromising a lot, but for good reason.
I think that's one of the big things to remember, is that there's a reason you're doing this. Like, there is a reason I am doing this, and yeah, I think it's easy to lose track of that. You know, yes, maybe if I hadn't done anything, I would have more money, but I'd still be miserable, and I'd probably still be searching for something else as well. You know.
Yeah, that's the thing. You can still feel those things, but there not be any solution on the horizon. So better to have those lows, but as you say, for them to be actually leading somewhere, so to speak. Yeah, it is tough. And that's one reason I wanted to do this podcast, is that, you know, you can talk about those highs and lows, and, you know, if anyone's out there thinking, oh, that's just a hard no for me, then I suppose it's sort of challenging that and saying, okay, but what's the alternative then? Nothing changes. It will just stay as it is if you don't soul search and you don't go through those tough times.
Absolutely.
Hopefully these podcasts help people realize that you can then come out the other end. And yeah, as you say, maybe I'll interview you again in a few years and you'll be doing something different. You never know.
Never know.
At least that's movement. At least that's, going somewhere, something shifting.
Exactly.
All right. So then I suppose just to finish off, any kind of nuggets of advice or wisdom that you would share from your experiences to other career changes?
I think that one of the main things is to really is to challenge your preconceptions and your gut feelings. I think it's important to trust your gut, but I think it's equally, if not more important, to understand your gut as to why you might have made a particular decision or had a particular feeling about a certain thing. So I think that learning about yourself and self-reflection is a very important aspect. Not just looking at the job, not just thinking about money. That was kind of my original focus, was looking at the money and looking at the status side of things, and those were huge blockers to me, unnecessarily so, I think. And I think probably just remember to be proud of yourself. You're doing something extremely hard, and even considering making a change is a brave thing. Starting to work with a career coach, I think, is a brave thing, and that is the beginning of the change. You're already doing something there, and stop giving yourself such a hard time. Basically, just give yourself a bit of a break, and everything can feel super hard, but you can do it. You can do it.
Amazing. You can do hard things.
You can do hard things.
Can't remember who said that, but yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chris. It was
Pleasure.
so lovely to talk to you and chat through all of those highs and lows. And yeah, I do think it's amazing what you're doing, and sounds fascinating much. Actually, I quite like the idea of doing something quite practical. I'm the DIY person in our house, and I don't even know how to use a drill, so yeah, I think it's quite inspiring, that's for sure.
Great.
And wish you the very best with the course, and would be great to stay in touch and hear how you're getting on. Chris has said that if anyone listening would like to just chat to him about his experiences or the profession, both professions, then yeah, you can find him on LinkedIn as Chris Rice. And so yes, with that, thank you, Chris, and
thanks for having me.
Speak to you soon.
Indeed.
Right, then. Take care.
You too. Bye.